Welcome to Rolling Studies. This is the podcast of the Hogwarts Professor, and I am joined here with the Hogwarts Professor, the Dean of Harry Potter Scholars, Dr. John Granger. Welcome, John.
It's wonderful to be here, Nick. How are you? How are things in Wales?
It's fine. It's been a little bit of time, hasn't it? So
Yeah.
I know real life has sort of got in the way, certainly my side, but it's great to be back and talking to you.
Yeah.
I suppose not very much has happened, John.
Yeah. Do you mean in Rolling World or in Granger Jeffrey World? I mean, Rolling World has been bubbling with news, hence our return to podcasting, I think. Yes, I've been busy. I'm working on book proposals and family things associated with the fast. The Orthodox are still in Great Lent until May. I know all of you friends out there that celebrate Christian holidays know that Easter is past in the West, but we've got another month here almost. But yeah, very, very, very busy. A lot of exciting things coming up. But we do want to touch base on some of the recent revelations on Twitter, news from the judicial to the grossly speculative, and the new title.
So we have a new title. So we no longer have to refer to it as Strike 8.
I'm sorry we can't do that. Why do we have to stop calling it Strike 8? I'm going to call it Strike 8. Anyway.
This was not predicted, I think, by anyone, but we have a title of The Hallmarked Man. It was announced very shortly after the trademark was registered. Trademark was registered using a company we haven't seen before that's got a director that we haven't seen before. So it's followed the pattern of the last book, which means we couldn't have predicted
she's
it.
well aware, obviously, or her handlers are, that you're looking at the other spots, so there'll be no clues dropped where they think you might find them. That's pretty good. That's pretty good, Nick. You've had an effect on Rolling Incorporated. But what is the announcement of this title, the Strike 8 title, the Hallmark Man? What does that tell us about a possible date of publication? I mean, has Rolling Inc. followed any kind of pattern on this in a previous title in the series? I mean, isn't there's a rule or a superstition? I think she's actually tweeted about this, that she doesn't name the book until she's finished it. What's up with this?
Nearly. So way back in 2015, so before Career of Evil was released, she tweeted that Robert shares my only writing superstition, which is that I only type the title page of a novel once the book is finished. That's a little bit different to naming the novel, and we know certainly some of these names have been trademarked long before the book was finished. But title release, we've got the title. Now we know from Career of Evil to Running Grave, we're looking at somewhere between 6 to 9 months between title release and the book actually hitting the bookshelves, which means we're likely to get it to read before Christmas. But most recently, the title release has happened after Rowling has actually finished the manuscript. Now, that was also my assumption, that she had finished the manuscript and she has released the title. But then she appeared to go on her very first visit to Sark. Now, this is strange for a writer to write about Sark and then visit the place she's writing about. And I think we've got some evidence now that hasn't happened. So she's gone to Sark as a fact-finding trip to write about it, she says in just a few chapters. But it means she hasn't finished. And in fact, as recently as a couple of days ago, we know she was writing about Cormoran and Robin in the North London district of Cricklewood in February. So she still hasn't finished writing the book. So that timeline may be slipping a little bit. I think she's closing in on the end, or she would never have released the title, I don't think. But she hasn't finished yet,
What?
so
Okay.
it's not even got to the editing process
You
yet.
got me all flustered now. You're giving me two directions for my head to go in here, Nick. Help me out. What previously have we known about? What pattern is there from announcement of the title to the date of publication? Could she still be on a publication schedule that her publisher says, this is what we have to do to start priming the pump for publication? Let's get that title out there, even though you're still doing your final changes. What would it tell us about a publication date if she follows the pattern of the previous books and the title announcement?
So if we ignore everything else and we just go from title to publication, we're looking at between 6 and 8 months.
All right, so that's a Christmas title then.
Yes, but on every previous publication, we know she's got that finished manuscript, and I think 3 times now we've actually had a photograph of that stack of paper, and we've had that before she's released the title.
So you're not gonna bet any money that we're gonna have this book by Christmas, which would mean really an October release, October, November.
A week ago, if you'd asked me, and I don't think I'm breaking any secrets in saying you did ask me a week ago, and I was much more certain then that she had both finished the book and we would be getting this before Christmas. I still think we are.
I think so too.
but I think it's going to be a lot more of an effort to get us there.
Rowling's recent burst of activity on Twitter, which we'll talk about in a little while, I think reflects that she's no longer really in the white heat crucible of writing and composing her work. I think she's probably in the edits stage, final edits from the proofs, and that her publishers have said, let's get this out by Christmas. That's definitely her sweet spot for sales now that she has a series going. So I really do think that we're in a publication conveyor belt stage where they have to get the title out at this point so that their marketing steps can go on. And I hope eventually, Nick, that you'll lay out what those when can we expect the next marketing stage? When can we accept the excerpts? So somebody tells me after the Running Grave excerpt fiascos that we're not going to see excerpts this time. But when we expect it if she's on that 6 to 8 month process? Obviously, the marketing has gone very well in previous adventures, and they want to keep that up.
I think you're right, because I can't really think of any other reason as to why the title release.
Exactly.
I mean, traveling to Sark is great, and she could have led that into Strike 8 without releasing the title. I had no clue about the trademarking. I know of at least 2 other people who are keeping an eye on the trademark listings who also had absolutely no clue. So the only reason I can think is to start that marketing excitement. But title we have, and it's the Hallmarked Man. What does that tell us, John?
Well, boy, it's fun to be asked that question because I haven't written about it. Rather than, John, tell us what you've already written about this, because the first thing you did when you heard the title was rush to your keyboard and explain everything you can think about, the alchemical markings of that. And Beatrice Groves wrote something. It's up on Hogwarts Professor, the weblog. And Louise Freeman, she was published recently at the Rowling Library. She wrote her piece about this. They've done what's always been done in Rowling criticism. You get a new book and you tear it apart and you analyze it and do all these things. But if you got a series, then you immediately begin speculating about what it's going to mean for the next series. And the Hallmark Man, because hallmarking has something to do with a saying of silver. Whether what the quality of the silver is clearly points to the idea that we're going to head into the albedo proper, because silver is a marker of the purification stage of alchemy. I normally would be all gonzo for this. Heck, I invented this thing. What was it? I predicted that it would be damp at the beginning of Half Blood Prince or something because we had the Negretto, the beginning of that one. I was doing weather report analysis, speculation and such. I mean, I've been there, I've done that. I invented the thing. All the wonderful B and Louise both mentioned my work or they cited it. That's great. But I'm not doing that anymore. That's really first, second, and third generation rolling studies work, and frankly, people that are better at that than I never had a very good track record. People that are better at that and more sober in their judgment, they're handling that now. Go to the Rolling Library, really our sister site, and read Louise Freeman's piece. It's as always, Louise is wonderful. Her stuff is great. And B Groves, she was out of the gate fast on this. B is really, the person to go to on this stuff. And she understands the hallmarking in terms of the silver things. That's all very good stuff. But what do I make of the title? This certifying the value of precious metals and the alchemical stuff. I don't think there's much to say about it. What does that tell us to know that we're going into the albedo, the purification stage? That we can say with any kind of certainty, that Strike is going to come to greater self-understanding. He's come to greater self-understanding in every book of the series. That there's revelations involved, and all that stuff is fascinating. But we don't have any real clue as to what shape that will take. We're not any less excited about getting the next book. Like, oh, we already know what's going to happen. I'm gonna do my best not to get swept up as I always have been. I mean, seriously, that was my job back at in 2000. I was or 2001. I was on Barnes and Noble University speculating about what we call Potter 5 then. What that was going to be about. I'm not going to do that. I'm a little more interested in the island of Sar. How do I pronounce this, Nick?
So this is Sark.
Sark.
This is the island of Sark.
I have it spelled right here. It's been featured in Rolling's tweets. It's got a Twitter homepage header. What can you tell your clueless American friend about this island? Before you do that, I want to say Potter punditry, the leaders in rolling studies, and I don't think I'm really doing the Gilderoy thing by saying I'm a big part of that. I think that we've largely been an unpaid service to Rolling Incorporated in priming their marketing pump. So, on the one hand, I don't think the speculation stuff gets us anywhere, and on the other hand, I feel like I'm being manipulated into, getting Strike fandom even more excited about the next book. I'm done with that. I love her dearly. I love her work. I admire her positions. I admire them more for their courage necessarily than their substance. I have profound disagreements about the nature of the world and stuff. But I think I need to go into harness to pull her cart anymore. So let's get into the things that we can be really confident that are going to be in this next book. Tell me about the island of Sark.
So Sark, certainly for British people, most British people will know that Sark is an island. It's a small island, and it's one of the Channel Islands. So the Channel Islands are a group of islands off the coast of France that are British, but are not part of the United Kingdom. So they are crown dependencies. They rely on the United Kingdom as their ultimate source of jurisdiction, but to most extent, they are independent, other than for things like foreign affairs and military and defense. They are independent countries. I think I certainly assumed that Sark was the smallest of the Channel Islands, so I knew it was tiny. But when I started researching, actually, I was wrong. So there are two islands that are even smaller than Sark. So I have done a little bit of research. So this is going to be a geography lesson in the traditional sense. Part geography lesson, and part this is my attempt to persuade John and the Granger family to move to Sark.
Our bags are packed.
So, some of the names may sound a little bit fantastical. So, its language is Sarquoise, which is a version of Norman French. Now, John, your ancestors were Norman.
Absolutely.
So I will be expecting you to pick me up on some of the pronunciation if I get it a bit wrong.
Yeah, okay. Should have seen that coming.
So Sark is a part of the Channel Islands. So they lie off the coast of Normandy within the English Channel. And Sark is a royal fief. Now, what that means is it's a feudal land holding held from the crown.
Oh, I like this.
It forms part of what they call the bailiwick of Guernsey. Now, a bailiwick is led by a bailiff, and the Channel Islands are split into two bailiwicks, the bailiwick of Guernsey and the bailiwick of Jersey. Although Sark forms part of that bailiwick, it is, again, for all intents and purposes, independent. So it's its own set of laws based on Norman law, and it has its own parliament.
Really?
It has its absolutely. The feudal landholder is called the seigneur. So the seigneur of Sark. Now, seigneur is what in the UK we would term the lord of the manor. And again, that's a holdover from Norman France, where all of the lordships were held as seignorships. It's hereditary. So the seigneurship is passed on down through families, but it is treated as property. So it can be mortgaged, it can be sold, and it has been in the past. So the current seigneur is not related to the original seigneur. Actually, one of the seigneurs went bankrupt and had to sell it on to another family. It has a small population. Now, when I say small, about 500 people. So this is a village, basically, in the middle of the sea. It consists of two islands. So there is Sark itself and a small island off the coast of Sark called Brecot. And the total area of those two islands is just a little over 2 square miles. So when I say this is a village, in terms of extent, this is a tiny village.
There's not going to be a Sark marathon.
No. So other than a quick boat trip across to Brecot, you could walk the boundary in a pleasant afternoon stroll. Sark itself has a peninsula off it called Little Sark. So there's Greater Sark and Little Sark. And the two are connected by a very narrow isthmus called La Coupe. And that header that Rowling showed of that walkway is La Coupe, which is the connecting pathway between Greater and Lesser Sark. It's one of the few remaining places in the whole world where motorcars and motorbikes are banned.
Oh, I'm on my way.
If you want to travel around the island, you can use a bicycle. You can use a horse or horse-drawn carriage. They do allow tractors for agricultural use. So you may also, and apparently lots of the population who aren't necessarily farmers also own a little tractor that they can poodle around the island in. You can only get there by boat. So it's far too small for a runway. You can imagine it's only 2 square miles. There's just no length to set a runway down. And helicopters are banned.
Helicopters are banned.
Helicopters are banned. So
how about seaplanes? Can seaplanes, fly in, land in the port? I mean, is it?
I think theoretically, however, this is the English Channel.
Yes.
I've never heard of a seaplane doing it, but I think theoretically you should be okay. The jurisdiction of Sark law actually extends from 3 miles of the coast, so it's the traditional maritime boundary.
Wow. Okay. Just some Sark snark here. Is there a record for swimming to Sark from the UK? I mean, from the main island? I mean, Is there a Norman to Normandy to Sark record? I mean, are there competitions? Is there a separate record book for Sark type events?
I've not heard of any inter-island swimming. Certainly, it's nothing like as famous as the British pastime of swimming from Dover to Calais. That's the traditional route. But when you came to South Wales, you asked me if anyone had ever swum across the Bristol Channel, and I couldn't find any record of anyone doing that either. I think, John, we're just not great deep sea swimmers.
Well, the Bristol Channel isn't as deep as the English Channel. I mean, come on. Is this a failure in imagination, or just the fact that you're not Looney Tunes like Americans and Japanese about inventing sports that never existed before? All right,
I think that it's a little bit of both, John. I think back in our history, those that were particularly adventuresome, they all hopped on the Mayflower and are over with you at the moment. We that are left thought that looks a bit risky. I'm gonna stay here and tend my sheep.
Really, the humility of the English, which is clearly not even 2 dermal layers down. But anyway, I love the superficial humility. It's a great thing. It's actually an insult about how all the loonies left for North America, but we'll let that go. So anyway, more about Sark. Forgive me the snarky interruption.
Well, it's basically a huge anachronism. So how did it get to where it is? So the history. There have been some sporadic inhabitants throughout history, but no real permanent settlement until the 16th century. So the island was used by French pirates for a time and became a general nuisance to British in the area. So Elizabeth I, who was famously against piracy of all kinds, unless it was carried out by the English, decided to offer what's called letters patent. So this is the creation of a new set of laws to a chap called Helier de Carteret. And she granted him Sark as a fief in perpetuity on 3 conditions. So the first condition was he has to keep the island free of pirates. He has to have at least 40 men stationed on the island who swore allegiance to the crown, and he had to pay a rent. Now the rent is currently, and it's always been very low, but is currently £70 a year. The seigneur pays to His Majesty the King.
Wait a minute. This is not adjusted for inflation. I mean, £70 in the times of Elizabeth I is a lot of money. £70 today is a parking spot.
I think even at the time of the original grant, it was considered quite an inhospitable spot. So the rent was only ever really nominal. So what de Carteret did as the first seigneur is he split up the island into 40 parcels of land called tenements. And each parcel of land was sufficient to support one family. And then he appointed 40 tenants on the condition that they built a house, and each tenant had to provide 1 man armed with a musket ready for service to the crown.
Now, are they shepherds? Are they farmers? I mean, this is 2 square miles. Even divided by divide that by 40. I don't see how that provides a living.
So it's basically they were a series of small holdings. So it was reckoned that about 5 acres was sufficient to support a family. Actually, that 2 square miles of land provides significantly more than that. The island supported sheep, arable products, and really quite a small dairy herd, but enough for them to be fairly self-sufficient.
Huh. I love it. Really, I'm getting more excited about this. I've got to see if my passport is up to speed.
Well, those 40 tenements still exist today. And for most of Sark's history, the 40 tenants provided the basis of Sark's government. So the Parliament of Sark is called Chief Pleas. and the tenants were the members of parliament for Chief Pleas. So each tenant was representative of his tenement, and the seigneur of Sark appointed what's called the seneschal. Now, the seneschal was the president of the parliament, and also he was the chief judge and jury for the jurisdiction of Sark. So he was responsible for both creating laws with the rest of the tenants in Chief Pleas, and then he was also responsible for judging against those laws.
All right, this is fascinating, Nick. A little obscure, and I love the arcana and stuff, but I mean, does this guy have the power to execute people? Can he throw people? Is there a jail? Is there a jail on Sark? I mean, what?
There is a jail. So there is a 2-person jail on Sark. It's essentially, and for many hundreds of years, is basically just a drug tank. So although it is a sovereign country, so it can set whatever laws it wants to, essentially most of criminal law, it has allowed or it has passed laws that have been proposed within Guernsey. And by practice, any sentence of greater than 2 days imprisonment has been referred to the Royal Court in Guernsey for them to make final judgment on.
Okay. I mean, you say it's a sovereign country, but
yeah.
If Jeff Bezos buys this place, he goes over there and it tells the 40 tenants, hey, I need a vacation spot, just off the coast. He's not going to get a seat at the UN. This is still, it's part of the United Kingdom, a sovereign nation within the United Kingdom.
I haven't got to the villains yet, John.
Okay,
there are villains. There are villains coming upon this idyllic scene. So I know, John, that you're a fan of big government. So you may not like this. You may not like this. I'm gonna describe the executive government of Sark. So figurehead, we know, is the seigneur. The head of government is the seneschal. So was the president of Chief Pleas and also the chief judge. Under him is a prebot, and he was sort of sheriff of the court and assisted with Chief Pleas. There was also what's called the griefer, and he was the clerk. There is a treasurer, and there are 2 part-time policemen. Senior policeman is called the connétable, or the constable, and there was a vingtenier who was his sort of deputy.
You keep saying was. I mean, this is 40 families. This is a lot of government for 40 families. Have they streamlined this so the Lord of the Manor basically says stop and go? I mean, what?
Well, all of these, of course, are part-time positions. So you may find the connétable is the barman, and the griefer is the postman. And sort of every few years they get bored and change over. So this, I think, in terms of the feel of the government, I think we could go to my favourite book, The Casual Vacancy. This is a parish council, but this is a parish council with the ability to set its own laws. Can you imagine?
But I can imagine. It sounds wonderfully Republican in the Platonic sense, not in the American sense.
It seemed to work okay for many years. So economy. So how does all this work? Okay, we've already said, there's not a lot going on there. A few sheep, a few arable crops, and cows. Well, these days it's largely tourism, tourism and financial services. So
do they have a special tax status?
They do have a special tax status, and the special tax status is essentially there is no tax. So there is no income tax, there's no capital gains tax, there's no inheritance tax.
Oh my goodness, these 40 families are making out.
Well, because the tax is so low, essentially it becomes really, really attractive for millionaires. So its chief import is millionaires. at the moment. If you have a lot of assets, you move to Sark, suddenly your tax liability goes right down, because the absolute maximum that Sark will charge you for property and capital tax will be about £3,500 a year. Now,
Oh
to a
my
millionaire,
goodness,
that's essentially zero.
What did Strike say once about Rokeby's butler's soap or something that what he owed Johnny Rokeby wouldn't keep his butler and
Yeah.
so.
So is this seeming attractive to you yet, John?
Oh yeah, especially if I'm a millionaire.
I could tell you were a little bit worried by the government. You felt there's slightly too many officers. It has a custom that can help you out. So they have a custom called clameur de haro. Now, clameur de haro is the right of any resident in Stark to stop any official activity in its tracks if you feel it is unjust.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
My ambitions to make millions has skyrocketed here.
So all you have to do, you have to memorize the Lord's Prayer in French.
Oh.
And then you shout, Haro, 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 à mon aide, mon prince, on me fait tort, which translates, and this is really rough translation, to my aid, my prince, I am being wronged.
Oh.
And then all official action has to stop until there is a meeting of the court of the Seneschal to decide on the matter.
You bring up the Lord's Prayer. So is this? I mean, do they have their own sovereignty in terms of their faith, or are they underneath the king as the head of the Anglican Communion?
So the official religion is Anglican. There is an Anglican church on Sark, and there is also a Methodist church on Sark, and there is a history of Methodism as well.
This is great. So they have a church they go to and a church they don't go to. This is great. This is every Christian.
I know that's important to you, John. You have the option of both going to a church and not going to a church.
That's great.
But unless you think this is ancient history, actually, the last time that the Clamor de Haro was enacted was only in 2021. So this is a real right that people can do to stop any action they do.
I love it. It was a COVID crisis. I'm confident. That's wonderful. Seriously, those Normans, they're crazy.
Yeah. So far, so idyllic. So it is it's a really attractive, quirky, anachronistic place to live. So thought the billionaire brothers David and Frederick Barclay. Enter the villains from stage left.
All right. We have drama. We have players. We have the setting. We got new players. Go ahead.
So they are billionaire industrialists with a not very savoury reputation. They made most of their money from the disintegration of Eastern Europe. They are very right-wing. They purchased the Daily Telegraph, again, under very murky circumstances. Billionaires, they are insanely wealthy. They could see the advantages of a tax haven, but they didn't really fancy living in a village, so they purchased the island of Brecco. Now, Brecco was one small island.
Good move. Good move.
Off the coast of Sark. They purchased the tenements. They built the most hideous Gothic faux castle that you can imagine.
I have quite the imagination, Nick. Seriously, the way you say billionaire, I think only a true card-carrying socialist can say billionaire with the invective that you do. I mean, it's just, oh my goodness, I shudder. I hope I never make $1 billion, because it would mean the end of our friendship, clearly. I mean,
John, we know the only honourable way of making $1 billion is through writing books. We both know that.
That's right.
They purchased the island of Brecco. They ignored all of the regulations about motor vehicles. So they built a helipad on Brecco, so they didn't have to travel using the ferry with all the other Sark residents. They have 4x4 vehicles zooming around the island of Brecco. That's been
caused zooming? Zooming must be a crime. Sorry.
certainly on Sark it is, and it has been responsible for numerous legal disputes. Now, because criminal matters, there's a right of appeal from Sark's court to Guernsey, and from Guernsey to the Privy Council in the House of Lords in the UK Parliament. The Barclay brothers just threw tons of money at it, and that was just the beginning. So what they essentially wanted was to have Brecco declared independent, so they didn't have to worry about this silly little parliament that was next door. Um, that spent a huge amount of money in litigation. That was eventually thrown out by the Privy Council because there was no history of Brecco ever being independent. It always formed part of Sark. They purchased a lot of the island of Sark. So I think at least 3 of the tenements within Sark. They purchased the hotels. They set up a vineyard. They were in dispute with Sark over the inheritance laws. So they eventually managed to push the British government into a case that went to the European Court of Human Rights that declared that Sark's parliament was non-democratic. And of course it wasn't, because most of the seats were just granted to the tenants. So they forced democracy onto Sark.
Oh, and now, goodness, these are villains.
I know. Well, can you imagine for 500 people, they now have, I think, 28 elected seats for a 500 people village to try and introduce democracy. The Barclay brothers tried to get their candidates into Parliament so that they could get their own laws through.
Right.
The people of Sark, being noble-hearted, independent people, refused to elect any of the Barclay candidates. So in 2008, they pulled their investments. So 500 people population, 170 people lost their jobs when they closed down the hotels, closed down the vineyard, closed down all of their businesses. Devastating for a small island community that it's really still only now just getting over. There's still a lot of resentments because a lot of the Barclay people are still on Sark, but David Barclay has died. Between the brothers, there's some falling out with the inheritance. So now Brecco and all of the Barclay businesses on Sark are up for sale.
Oh my!
So it looks like the island is starting to heal, but
I see an
huge
opening.
Trouble.
I see an opening for a dying rock star to purchase, a hotel or something for his children.
All it took was one boat ride and a few overnight stays for a well-known author to be now rumored to be purchasing Brecco. A rumor that, of course, I think is complete nonsense.
Well, she's got to have something for her children to do. I mean, what the heck? I mean, and she's got to love the tax thing. She can say that she's always boasted that she's paid her fair share of the tax. If she lives on this island off the coast of the island, she's given to knocking down buildings and rebuilding them, and what she likes. I mean, she can have a second, fortress of solitude in which to write her books. Seriously, if Agatha Christie had managed her finances right and had the option of moving to Sark, the world would have been, would not have been blessed with all of Agatha's books. But anyway, this is great. What do you make of all this?
So, it's more than a couple of chapters in a book, right, John?
Yeah, it's a fascinating story.
And I can certainly see, just from the research that I have done, this could be a very rich seam of lake material for Rowling to use in the future. Do I think she's used very much of it for this book? I don't think so. I don't think she'll have had the time. I can see maybe some of the Barclay tensions coming up in the book. It is still very much a raw, healing but divided society. I can imagine some of that appearing in The Hallmarked Man. But there's so much more in Sark, and I can imagine Rowling being fascinated with it, and I'm hoping we may see some of that in future work.
I love it. I love it. and thank you for doing all this research. I'm, I am going to, I've looked at this, what you told me in the moderator channels about this island in the channel. My thought was this would have to have something to do with smuggling. I'm still, I don't know if I don't think I'll ever be free of my theory that the white horses of Lethal White are going to wind up being heroin. And that smuggling is going to be a big deal eventually. Sark is perfectly situated for smuggling. Maybe they've got a guarantee from these old patents of the king to prevent piracy, but there's nothing that prevents an island situated where it is from being a thing for smuggling. Especially
Smuggler's Island just brings up such Enid Blyton visions.
Oh, for me, it's P.D. James. Believe it or not, she put one of her best books. The book's featuring Cordelia, the character that I think Hermione and Robin Ellicott are based on. The second book in the series is called The Skull Beneath the Skin, and it's set on an imaginary island, and there's a wonderful near-death experience in a smuggler's channel and stuff. I mean, it's a wonderful book, and I'm really into the connection between P.D. James and Rowling because of the psychological thing. I mean, she talks about it's not just P.D. James, it's Ruth Rendell and this and such, but I'm really leaning towards P.D. James on the source of most of this stuff. So that was exciting to me. There was this thing, but again, I'm fourth generation. I'm committed to the fourth generation of criticism, and as you said, she goes there after she's written the greater part of the book. It's only going to be a couple of chapters, and yet she makes it the Twitter heading thing, and she has all these things with her the bracelet with the bob. Everybody's talking about all the things on the bracelet, and I thought, wow, this is such fan servicing. This reminds me of all the stuff that was done for Running Grave, where we got the pictures of the street where Strike we find Strike hid there waiting for Robin's messages, and or Robin herself. We got the picture of the church. That was a big deal, but none of it was a big deal. None of it told us anything about the book. None of us. It was all just to get fans excited about the coming book. And this one looks like an even thinner read than what was done for Running Grave. I mean, you can at least say that church had a key scene in it. I mean, we'll talk about that, I hope. I don't think it was that key a scene. It may have been just a big part of her misdirection. But that picture of Sark and all of this fascinating stuff, I think you're right that it's probably something that she'll explore at length, when she writes a book about another parish council that struggles with rich people. As you say, the Lake material is there in terms of the agonies of being rich. And we'll talk about that in terms of Wizarding News and such. I hope in a moment. But before we go on to that, there's another thing. There's a specific character from the island's history about whom, once again, I have to confess complete ignorance. I didn't know Sark was an island. I didn't know any of this stuff. I didn't know about the Barclay brothers. Can you bring me up to speed about the specific character that she said she had a conversation about? What's that about?
Okay, so Jo purchased a beautiful silver, or Jo didn't actually, it was her husband purchased for her, a silver bangle. And she was talking to the son-in-law of the designer of the bracelet over Twitter. And she said, your father-in-law was lovely and we had a good chat about Henry Carteret. Now, you remember the name of the original seigneur of Sark, Hilliard de Carteret? So this is the same family. It's a very important Channel Island family. So Hilliard de Carteret was originally the seigneur of Saint-Ouen on Jersey before he became seigneur of Sark. But there are many people with the surname of either de Carteret or Carteret within Jersey and on Sark, and indeed now on Guernsey, although they don't have as long a history on Guernsey. So it could be a number of people, but the only famous Henry de Carteret that I can find is Henry Frederick Carteret, the first Baron Carteret. So he was a member of Parliament for Staffordshire and Wobley in Herefordshire. He was Master of the Household to King George III, and he was an important man within the Channel Islands, so he was hereditary bailiff of Jersey. So he was an important man of his time, but not terribly interesting, I would think, and not an obvious subject of conversation between Joe and a bracelet designer. My feeling is either there is another Henry de Carteret who isn't so famous but is a prominent person on Sark, or Joe misspoke or misremembered, and actually she's talking about that original seigneur, Helier de Carteret, rather than Henry Carteret.
Okay, I'm curious about the historical figure. I'm curious about rolling Sark tweets, and you have satisfied my curiosity on this guy. I mean, he sated me really. I'm going to repeat myself. I'm all but certain this is the case, that the Sark backdrop and the tweets are just fan servicing and pump priming pre-publication, just like the Norfolk pictures pre-running grave. That Strike fandom is being manipulated into another speculative dead end. We're going to see. We've already seen all the excitement and fandom on the Twitterati.
I suspect you're right, John. I expect we are being led by the nose a little bit. And maybe I'm just a little bit less jaded, but I still find it really great fun to be led by the nose like that.
Yeah.
Particularly when it does seem to be a dead end. So who on earth is Henry de Carteret? And I do hope he does get a mention in the book, so we can get a little bit more of a clue.
Good. Okay, good. I thank you for brightening my day. I mean, if I were going to go this speculative route, I really hope that Rokeby is hoping to buy property on Sark because he's looking to he's afraid he's going to die and he doesn't want his inheritance to be totally destroyed, and so he's looking for a tenement there. That's great. But let's go to the fourth point. Okay, this has all been good, and these tantalizing distractions are a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. Thank you for doing all this research. I never would have been able to find these things. I didn't have a starting point on how to do this. My family left the UK before it was the UK. Indentured service to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. All right. Before all this happened, all this tweeting, and the news has happened since, which is really probably why people are listening. You'd brought up a fourth generation, a truly substantive idea about Strike 8. Now the Hallmark man, namely that Charlotte Campbell Ross didn't commit suicide. When I was preparing for this podcast, I thought I'm much more interested in that than anything that I've learned, and forgive me, what I've learned today about Sark. If Charlotte Campbell Ross didn't commit suicide, everything changes. Do you still think that's going to be something that we're going to learn about in the Hallmark man?
I do, and I think it's gotten a little bit of traction in the fandom. Louise posted a wonderful post a few weeks ago refuting that thesis, which I think was really valuable because it helped me really to concentrate on why I think it's a valid theory. So Louise, as you know, is a psychologist, so she's well versed in the theory and practice of mental states. And of course, Charlotte was exhibiting all of the classic behaviors you would expect of someone who would attempt and even commit suicide. And I think that's a valid criticism of the idea. She is
Rowling did her homework? How is that a criticism? That's
a criticism of the theory that she didn't commit suicide. Right. So I think she is absolutely a suicide candidate. But of course, if you're a murderer,
that's the point of the theory.
You would do your very best to play to that because that is essentially going to be your alibi. Even if it does turn out that Charlotte did commit suicide, as we saw in The Running Grave, of course, there are suicides and there are suicides, but within the series, there is no suicide in isolation other than, on the surface, Charlotte. So there is always a moving hand that has driven someone to it through threats or pressure that is, to all intents, murder. So whether it's by direct hand or by through manipulation, I do think we haven't seen the last of the investigation, at least into her death. And I'm hoping we're going to see that in the next book.
That's fascinating, because that's really where the conversation should be. Forgive me, about this thing, and the idea that because Charlotte is obviously a suicide candidate, that's the whole point of the misdirection. If, as you say, if Charlotte weren't as, we wouldn't believe it. That's all the other suicides that we see in the book weren't suicide candidates. They were sort of forced into the category. Charlotte, everybody's accepted as that. And for the structural reasons and all the other stuff, this is a freight train of an idea. That this is basically why Rowling has set this up as she has. So the next 3 books are about not only the false suicide of Charlotte Campbell, but the false suicide of Strike's mother. All right, that's the other idea that we were exploring before our long hiatus here was that Robin is sterile. Has that gained any traction in fandom, Nick?
But very little, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing anything in terms of comment.
Yeah,
I think it's still out there for some degree.
Really, unlike the alchemy and the chiastic ideas and such, which I think most Potter pundits and Rowling readers, serious strikers, accept to various degrees of embracing. The one thing that these folks really resist, for whatever reason, is the mythological content. And Robin as Artemis, and how this conforms with the several mythological streams inside this series. I think, really, Hogwarts Professor, our site is the only place where people talk about that at any kind of depth. That's really put off to the side. And the Robin is sterile idea, I see the resistance to it because everybody so much wants a happy ending here, right? A happy ending, meaning a heteronormative family with children. That this is anathema to them. And the big objection that I read to this, I thought was very, very compelling, was how does she find out that she's sterile? I was stumped by that, right? Because she's not showing any symptoms. It has to be a function of pelvic inflammatory disease that was undiagnosed, and that can be undiagnosed. Clearly, if she has that, it's because she has no symptoms of it. The symptoms are pretty dramatic. You would know it if you did have the symptoms. But assuming that she's asymptomatic, how does she find out that she's sterile? I mean, it's just an idea that's out there. And then someone who commented, and forgive me, I don't have this right at my fingertips. It's not my idea, certainly, and it's in the comment thread under the Substack post that has this on about Robin being sterile. Is that she becomes pregnant via the machinations, basically a pregnancy trap launched by Mr. Murphy, Detective Murphy, and that one of the consequences of PID is ectopic pregnancy. And we have that pointer in the character, really the foundation crime of Troubled Blood was the death of a woman from ectopic pregnancy that Margot Bamborough didn't care for properly. That's really the death that caused the whole morality play of her own murder. That idea that Robin becomes pregnant and doesn't realize it in time because it's an ectopic pregnancy, which results in her hysterectomy. that to me, it seems to be, especially with the pregnancy trap idea and things like this, that makes a lot more sense to me. It's how that will show itself, and how it will show itself, I think, is the main, the main strong objection to this idea. The idea that it's just unpalatable or whatever. Those things I think I have to put in the same category as the Charlotte, of course, commits suicide because she's a suicide candidate. That's like, well, okay, that's fine. Except that you don't understand how Rowling writes. It's not misdirection unless you're really sucked into the vortex. You're really sucked into the whole idea of it. And here, the Robin is sterile idea has to be a sudden onset tragedy that will be a woman having, that she so identifies with Margot Bamborough. It wouldn't be that surprising to me if she has an ectopic pregnancy in a pregnancy trap, which is such a trope of Rowling's work. I mean, is there any series or single novel in Rowling's work where there isn't some sort of pregnancy trap? I was thinking Cursed Child, but I have to think that Bellatrix Lestrange's conception with the Dark One was a pregnancy trap. This is it's in all of her books. It's in all of her books. No, anyway, so that's that. We were talking about suicide, and I want to talk. I'm going to use that as a segue to. There have been two explosions in Rowling World, largely taking place on her social media feed, her 14 million follower Twitter platform. And don't ask me to call it X. Anyway, so that first, there were her fights with a person, India Willoughby, that identifies as a woman, but is a biological male. And this person stuck his finger in Rowling's eye and was slapped down mightily. In the way only Rowling in her snarky, invective way can do. She's a master of this medium. I mean, she was beating down the President of the United States. What is India Willoughby to her, right? That led us to the events of April 1st. But just after that, she got involved with a Harry Potter website that posted something about her first daughter, Jessica. And I don't even know Jessica's last name. Is it Rowling Orontes? Is it Oronte? I don't know.
We don't know. That is not publicly available. So we know that she has a daughter, Jessica. So this website now goes by the name of Wizarding News. It is a continuation, really, of the very old Harry Potter news aggregator, a well-known Harry Potter fan website back in the day.
It won an award, right? She gave it one of her awards.
Yeah. It was certainly in the early days of the online fandom. It was extremely successful in gathering all the latest Harry Potter news and comment, and essentially locating links to all of that on the one site, hence the Harry Potter news aggregator. When Rowling published her infamous tweet in December 2019, and the Harry Potter fandom, all the big websites, decided to side with gender enthusiasm rather than the more sober take that Rowling has on transgenderism. The Harry Potter news aggregator webmaster took an even stronger view than either the Leaky Cauldron or MuggleNet. So his view was that you should not interact or promote at all with either Rowling or any of her properties. He got on to online arguments with them, essentially blocked most of the traditional fandom, even those that were, as I say, gender enthusiastic, and became, I suppose you'd say, a little bit on the outskirts of the fandom. He, over the years, has blocked most people who form part of the traditional fandom. So the Harry Potter Twitter account has been blocked. My Twitter account has been blocked, despite having no interaction whatsoever with HPNA. So he's been attacking Rowling pretty constantly from that time. And some of the attacks, I think, objectively, are pretty nasty. So he hasn't done it with anything
what is the
like.
size? He sounds like he's self-isolated. How much following does he have?
It's awful difficult to say on Twitter these days. So the number of accounts that follow him is sizable. So it's like 38,000. When he posts something on Twitter, he'll only get a few dozen interactions, but what he will do is he will constantly repost posts. So he may post the same post and repost it a few dozen times so that slowly
Wow.
the interactions will come up to maybe the low hundreds. So it looks like it's a fairly popular post, but it's just been reposted and reposted. Rowling, of course, sensibly has completely ignored him until. So there is a young lady from Brazil called Jessica Arantes. Now, this young lady is approximately, but not exactly the same age as Jessica. She is a swimwear model and an Instagram personality. She has a small clothing business. She recently got married and has, within the last year, given birth to her first child. A few years ago, one of the tabloids, a UK tabloid called The Mirror, picked up on this Jessica Arantes getting married, didn't research it very well, and assumed that Jessica Arantes was Rowling's daughter and published a story in the gossip columns saying that Rowling's daughter was getting married. In the Hogwarts Professor back channels, I sent round a quick email because it didn't take very long to research it and demonstrate that it wasn't true, just to warn everyone to stay away from this story. It's complete bunkum. Similar thing happened shortly after the birth of her first child. There was, I don't think it even got as far as the tabloids, but some of the gossipy news sites released a story saying that Rowling was now a grandmother. Got very little traction because all you basically need to do is take a look at the Instagram account, work out that she's in Brazil, work out that she posts photograph of her mother and father, neither of whom are Rowling, to work out that this is a completely different lady. Unfortunately, the webmaster of Wizarding News failed to do that. Okay, now this isn't so much a problem in itself. So he's made a mistake that other people have made and he's put it on his channel. The mistake that the webmaster made was he went further than either of those two news sites did. He worked out that this Jessica Arantes hasn't got Rowling in her name. So what he said was, Rowling's daughter left home, moved to a different country. He falsely said Portugal rather than Brazil, and changed her name so that she's no longer associated with Rowling because of her hateful views. Now, of course, this isn't even speculation. It's just made up. We can call it a lie. It's based on nothing other than he's looked at the name and come up with a reason.
It's wish fulfillment fantasy.
It is wish fulfillment fantasy. Rowling heard about this and I think was incandescent. So we've seen her before where she has picked on someone on Twitter and very publicly shamed them. And she did that to Wizarding News. She didn't hide the name. Now, fortunately, most people that follow Rowling, I think, were already blocked by Wizarding News. But still, there was a lot of outcry on Twitter about what this guy did.
You say that Rowling was incensed by this, and she acted. I mean, she said she was acting to defend her child or this other woman named Jessica Arantes. Was there any real danger to Rowling's daughter in this? I mean, this. Forgive me. You described Wizarding News. It sounds like a man living in his parents' basement who's consumed with an idea and has a limited audience, has a certain number of followers that gives his existence meaning, basically. But he's a pathetic excuse for a person. I don't. I hope I don't say that. I hope I don't say that simply to put him down. I'm just trying to get my grip on this character. Um,
Yeah. So
this
are you asking, was there really a real danger that meant that Rowling had to react to this? So I think we can approach this on two levels. On the surface level, what she said was that basically Wizarding News had, it's an online term called doxing. They doxed an innocent woman and her child. Now, that's, I don't think, strictly speaking, true. So, Jessica Arantes from Brazil is an internet personality, and all of that information was available online. And in fact, because she's an internet personality, part of what she does is to self publicize. Okay. She doesn't publicize, of course, that she's J.K. Rowling's daughter. So, you could argue that if somebody in Brazil wanted to do J.K. Rowling's daughter harm, then possibly this lady could have been put in danger. But I think that's a bit of a stretch. I think certainly if you met and interacted with this lady or worked out where she lived, I think very soon it would become apparent that this was not Jessica Arantes in terms of lifestyle, in terms of where she lives, how she sounds. She's not Jessica Arantes.
this you mentioned that she's done this before, and I think of two things right away, and this is public record. We've discussed this at Hogwarts Professor before. The first was Steve Vander Ark and the lawsuit that was brought against not him actually, but his publishers. But it really was about Steve Vander Ark and his book, The Harry Potter Lexicon, and then Amanda Donaldson, who was her personal assistant, who was actually thanked in the acknowledgments to I think more than one of the Cormoran Strike books. And she was taken down quite brutally in court. I doubt that she'll ever be able to work in that field again. And now the leader, basically the entirety of Wizarding News, who has not been named, but anybody can do a search and find out who that is, has had his world crushed. 14 million followers piled on him about attacking Rowling's daughter and putting her at risk, and Rowling was perfectly justified in doing this, etc. I think there's something in common with those three things. One, the attack on Steve Vander Ark in his book, another man whose website won a Rowling Award for its utility and such. I think we should all thank God that Hogwarts Professor has never been recognized by Rowling. It seems to be a curse. That happened in the wake of the publication of Deathly Hallows and that landmark event in Rowling's life. Really the successful completion of a 17-year journey, and just the power that she felt at that point. She smacked down this relatively helpless man. Steve is a friend, and so I won't share all the details, but it was quite the horrific event from which he's recovered wonderfully. But in the next case, Amanda Donaldson, I don't quite see the right away the great success that happened before that, or the change in her life that changed. Because really, Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows wasn't much greater success than Half-Blood Prince, but the completion of the thing, it was a lifetime personal event, the finishing of the series. And then there was this attack in court with barristers and such. Not with barristers, that was in a New York court, I think. But anyway, this second attack or litigation, I should say, not an attack, a litigation contra Amanda Donaldson. I'm not sure where that goes, but here, this smacking down a relatively pathetic and harmless human being and bringing all of her influence to bear on this person, really an out of proportion response to the threat, does come in the wake of a great victory in Rowling's life. I mean, you have to think that Rowling has been, since the December 2019 tweet heard around the world on gender issues, where Rowling, as you said, took the position that no, essentially your mental illness does not qualify as a civil right against women to take women's safe spaces. Or you can't say, I can't say you are what you are biologically. That tweet caused the attempt at canceling her and threats of physical violence, rape, murder, etc., against her, her family. It was the Solway at Coagula event. Whether she did it deliberately or not, that's for us to we speculated about that. Very recently, Rowling has won a great victory on that count. I'm not talking about the April 1st event, but a report that was made that essentially made the chemical castration and surgical mutilation of minors in the United Kingdom, it's illegal, but it's certainly contra government policy now. And this finding is world changing. It in effect says that Rowling's position in December of 2019 was correct, and this is going to have repercussions. I mean, things that happen in the United States largely happen either because of trends in California or trends in the United Kingdom, and this is a very big wave coming from the United Kingdom and the Nordic countries against this gender madness, especially with respect to minors and women's safe spaces and eventually women's sports. That finding was a great victory, and almost immediately afterwards, and she posted about it clearly. It was cause for celebration. Rowling spearheaded and represented. She was more than the figurehead in the movement to resist that movement. And immediately after she wins that battle, she smacks down this nobody at a website that she's given an award to. I mean, the bracketing of the Steve Vander Ark and the Wizarding News thing, the lexicon and the news thing seems to be in parallel. What do we know about the timing of the Amanda Donaldson lawsuit? And how was that also, how do you see that, Nick?
So I think for each of these three instances, we can look at what's going on the surface, what's the deeper reasoning behind it, because I think Rowling needs to justify what she's doing to herself, and then what's the real reason, and what's the seismic thing that's happening in the background. Now, with Amanda Donaldson, the surface is obviously this young lady essentially stole many thousands of pounds from Rowling. What's the deeper reason? How does she justify this for herself? Well, the deeper reason, and this is what she said to the press, so we have to take it at face value, is the reason why she took it to court was she wanted to stop Amanda from doing this to anybody else. Now, we know at the point of the court case, she had taken on another job as a personal assistant to the head of an engineering company, and she had a company credit card and was making purchases on that company credit card for her new boss. Her new boss knew nothing about what had happened with Rowling.
Rowling, of course, could have simply contacted the new boss.
She could have done, because now we move on to the real reason. The real reason, which again we only get, it wasn't really reported in the press at the time, but reading the transcripts of the trial, is Amanda Donaldson was blaming other members of Rowling's staff for all of the thefts. Chief among them, Fiona Shapcott, who had worked for Rowling loyally for many, many years. So that's the real reason. That's what made Rowling angry. But what's the seismic thing that's happening at the background? Again, we just gleaned this from the court transcripts. Her husband, Dr. Murray, had recently taken an extended leave of absence as a general practitioner from the surgery he was working for in Glasgow to become a business manager for Rowling. Now we know that he hasn't returned to general practice, so this was a seismic shift in the dynamic of the Rowling Murray family. Essentially, what was Rowling as main breadwinner became a family business, a mom and pop business. It's now Rowling doing the writing, but her husband is a business partner.
Okay, this is not, it sounds a bit like gossip, but Rowling has opened the door to this kind of conversation because of her Lake and Shed thing. And there's no way that the Rowling Murray relationship is not, and the roles of the husband and wife in that relationship, which are clearly unconventional. Rowling is not known by her married name, though she said she'd actually prefer to go by Murray, but this is her brand, as it were, to be J.K. Rowling. She's an international figure, certainly among writers almost without peer, and she represents the Rowling-Murray family. People will think of him always as Mr. Rowling, Mr. J.K. Rowling, rather than her as Mrs. Neil Murray. And you see in The Christmas Pig, and you see these issues in Cormoran's Strike, in terms of Robin's struggles with her identity as a woman, as a working woman with a professional vocation. And you see it with Cormoran's Strike in terms of his struggles with women and what they do. That these ideas of gender roles and biological sex, I think, almost certainly come out of their reflections on the biggest challenge facing their marriage. Just prima facie, this was something that had to be addressed, and that Rowling had and Neil Murray had resolved that conflict amicably, to their mutual satisfaction. There was no sign of divorce. There was no sign of real acrimony and this and that. That was a great victory, and would explain why she would once again go after. I get. You're saying the real reason that she went after Wizarding News was because she was protecting her daughter. This was, mama bear type thing, and here she was protecting someone that had loyally worked for her. And as I think it was B. Groves said, rich people have rights too. If you steal from rich people, even if it's a trivial amount, they have rights too. Yeah. I get that. But you also have responsibilities to act proportionately. That she could have simply contacted the boss there, and any person, and just followed Amanda Donaldson and made sure that every person knew that and stopped her. But instead, she crushed her in public, so that no one can search for Amanda Donaldson now and not find that news right up front. And the same with Steve Vander Ark, and the same with the leader of Wizarding News, who will go unnamed here, though his name is easily found if you research this. This, I get it. What you're saying is that it's personal, and that's, you can't threaten her or touch her beloved object. You can't say that you're going to write the book on Harry Potter when she wants to write that book on Harry Potter. You can't attack a loyal member of her staff and not get slapped down, and you can't ever do anything with any of her children and not see her go berserk. I think, though, what we're seeing actually is Rowling at a fault. That when she wins a great victory, like she did recently in the trans wars, when she wins a great victory, not a great victory, but she has a shared victory with her husband about their relationship, and then she had the victory of Deathly Hallows, we see that she becomes, what I guess the Weasley brothers would call the big head girl, that she acts in disproportionate. That's a shame. It's a shame. Because, as we talked about earlier, Cormoran's Strike is largely a series about suicide. Begins with a fake suicide, has the suicide, supposed suicide of Strike's mother is the large backdrop to the series. The pivot of the series is a fake suicide. There's suicide sprinkled throughout the books. Really, the core crime of the Silkworm is a suicide of an author's wife, or a woman author, and that's the foundation novel, really, the series. This suicide is all over these books, and why one takes one's life. Isn't it possible that Rowling is finally going to push somebody too far, and that she's going to be the person that what was the rapper saying? The press shoved her out off that roof. That isn't Rowling risking being. If this guy self-harms, is this going to be laid right at her doorstep, and rightly so?
Yes. Is the honest answer. So, John, you and I were both worried about this. Keeping an eye on the Wizarding News Twitter account from yesterday. He's back up, public and visible. His output doesn't appear to have changed. He's not directly made any references to the tweets that got him into trouble, but he's certainly still attacking Rowling, and I certainly hope that Rowling will continue ignoring that particular site.
That's
But it's
wonderful news on all counts. He's not been totally crushed, as pathetic as he is, and
so 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 I think it was certainly an emotional response from Rowling, and it was a response to her daughter's phone call. So this is really an unprecedented example of somebody born so blessed in fortune, Jessica, and is entirely unknown. So she has zero digital footprint.
And that's a
Newspapers,
remarkable achievement because Rowling has said that
yeah,
she's a scientist. I mean, how you can keep publication is vocation's life.
yes, but we don't know what name she uses. There are no publicly shared recent photographs of her from, I think, that tabloid photograph of 10 years old. That again, Rowling won a great victory in against the publishers of that photograph, and they haven't tried to photograph since. Because Jessica Rowling is not, any stories about Jessica Rowling would not be in the public interest. That is, the public has no
No,
real need or right to know. But if there was a story, so if, for example, somebody published and it was true, Jessica Rowling has changed her name because of her mother's hateful views, that would become a legitimate public story. They could then start going after Jessica, trying to get friends of Jessica to comment on it, trying to doorstep her, photographs of where she is. She's now in the public view. That's why Rowling felt she had to step on it. But that's not to say it wasn't emotional. That's the deeper reason why she had to step on it. But it was that phone call from Jessica. So Rowling said it was the sound of her voice. She went into Mama Bear mode and created this very public squash down on Wizarding News. I think if it wasn't an emotional response, there were other ways of doing it. She has the lawyers, she has the PR guys who could have worked out who this individual was, where they lived, and got him served without any of it being public.
that's right.
But that was,
That's my only point is that I think the bravado and the thing is just the I have this power, I have this ability, I need to wield it, for whatever reason. Oh well, she seems to have, the people that she thanks in her acknowledgments, I think clearly came to the same conclusion we did, that Rowling had put herself into a very bad position in terms of Wizarding News, even though the 14 million followers seemed to a person to want this person crushed. And she it was only, 2 or 3 days that she went after this. But it was after a period of significant silence, and all of a sudden she was back. I shouldn't say that. She'd gone through the India Willoughby and the other. Forgive me. It's because he thinks that Rowling is going to be thrown in jail. What is his name?
oh, the prosecutor.
Yes.
It's not at the tip of my. I've got him in my notes as
Yes.
an ex-prosecutor. Again, people have been digging into his background as they do. It turns out he did work for a brief period of time as a prosecutor. He's currently unemployed. So I don't know how seriously we, the sober public, should take his views. He's been demonstrated that he's wrong, at least on a point of law in terms of Police Scotland.
Yeah.
But he was taken very seriously again by the gender enthusiast community.
All right. So enough about Wizarding News. We're segueing now into the April 1st. I mean, we thought for a minute that Rowling was going to be in jail at this time, doing her John Bunyan exercise, finishing off the Cormoran Strike series from behind bars. I wrote about this on the day that it happened, on April 1st, the Weasley twins' birthday, because it had been anticipated. She had been told by this sort of former prosecutor that she better start deleting her tweets or she was going to be, locked up. And she said, "Boy, if you think I'm going to delete tweets because of you, moron, wait for the mother of all
April Fools
jokes, right? So, and sure enough, she went relatively silent. She said she was going to take a break from the space. I guess she went on Easter holiday. She gave some hint in terms of her time zone, where she was. I didn't follow all that, but sure enough, on April Fool's Day, it started bright and early. She put out an 11-piece tweet where she jokingly referred to 10 mockingly, I should say, rather than jokingly, mockingly referred to 10 transgender women, and I use square quotes for that, as women. And, talking about Samantha, of course she called her Sam, and some of them were criminals, some of them were people that just, went into women's spaces, like sports. Some of them were, men that were chosen to represent women by the United Nations and such. And the 11th piece, which was where she delivered her, her message, she said, April Fools, none of these people are women. They're all biological men, and let's get this over with. It went to her self-explanation, which, as is Rowling's way, was more than lucid. And then she said, arrest me. # arrest me. I look forward to coming back to the home of the Scottish Enlightenment, which the chief legacy of which is free speech, and to be arrested when she hits the tarmac. Now that was a pretty bold statement of civil disobedience. Am I misreading this? I don't know the UK law or the Scottish law, but I mean, she was basically saying, if this is the law and this is the way you're going to interpret it, I've just misgendered 10 people, public figures, some criminal, but public figures. Come for me. Is that the right reading of what happened?
So that was certainly her intent, to really find out what the law is. Now, you may be wondering, this law took several years in the drafting. It wasn't done in secret, although you could argue that their consultation was a little bit strange. But why would we need some public figure then to try and work out what the law actually meant?
Can't all rational people understand this law?
Well, the problem is what is a reasonable person, John? That's the big question. So we're talking about the hate crime legislation that came into force on the 1st of April in Scotland. So it's separate legal jurisdiction. This is just Scotland, not England. And this aims to address stirring up hatred based on the protected characteristics of age, disability, religion, sexual orientation, transgender identity, or being intersex. Now, the question is, okay, well, nobody really should be stirring up hatred against any group. Right. But sure, okay, so for these particular groups, we're going to criminalize stirring up hatred. But what does that mean? And what that means depends upon who you ask. The legislation itself couches it in terms of what a reasonable person would think.
Does he have a name or she have a name? I mean, do we have can we dox this person?
The nominal reasonable person. Well, you would think that Scottish ministers would be reasonable people, and you would think that heads of non-governmental charities would be reasonable people, and you would think London prosecutors would be reasonable people. But all of these people are on record as saying misgendering a person counts as a hate crime in this legislation. So if you misgender someone, a complaint can be made, the police will investigate you, you will go to court, and you could be, in the most serious cases, imprisoned for up to 7 years.
Now, and this is something that Americans don't understand, is that there was a man recently convicted of raping 2 little girls and was given a 6-year sentence in Scotland for the molestation of 2 helpless children. And he got a 6-year sentence. But if he had called them little boys instead of little girls, he could have gone to jail for 7 years. I mean, this is like, to Americans, this is we've entered, upside down land, the world of wing nuttery. Go on.
So I try not to come on individual cases, particularly the ones I haven't got the details on. Almost certainly, even if it was felt that it was misgendering was a prosecutable case, then you would get no more than an administrative slap on the wrist.
Yes.
But stirring up hatred in the terms of 7 years actually would be something like, I don't know, the Kristallnacht in Berlin.
Okay.
Yeah. But, and this has been said a lot, that the process is the punishment.
It's lawfare. It's lawfare.
Yeah. So if stating biological reality is even partially criminalized, then the fact that the police can turn up at your doorstep is a punishment. The fact that you can be dragged off to the police station to be interviewed under caution is a punishment. The fact that all of this will appear on your record is a punishment, even if it never gets to court. So, because all these people had been saying and advising Rowling to take down her tweets, because, again, in Scots law, even if you wrote it a year ago, but it's still up on a website somewhere, it's published every time somebody reads it. So Rowling wanted to make really sure, okay, what is the law? She stated biological reality, so she stated a fact, and she said, okay, when I come back to Scotland, arrest me. She duly received complaints from members of the public, thousands of complaints from members of the public saying that she had committed a hate crime by making that post on the 1st of April. In fact, she was the most complained about person in Scotland, and the Police Scotland received over 4,000 complaints on that first day of the legislation. Would you like to guess, John, who got the most complaints in Scotland?
Oh, so she was second.
She was second.
She was second. I can't think of any. Narrow-minded Oklahoman that I am. I don't have a list of Scottish celebrities who commit hate crimes on the tip of my tongue.
So the most complained about person was the person that was in charge of this legislation, the First Minister of Scotland, for a speech he made a few years ago complaining about the lack of diversity in Scottish institution and politics, where he read out a list of positions that were held by white men.
And because this was to imply, I linked to this in my post on this, that this is the notorious speech. The implication was that, by being white, they were implicitly prejudiced against persons of color in favor of those of their same, racial identity. Absolutely amazing. And so, but I don't know the demographics of Scotland. I'm guessing they trend white. I mean, how does this guy?
Yes. So I think current estimates are somewhere between 97 and 98% white.
Really?
Yeah.
And the First Minister, who is a person of color, believes that he lives in a racist country because clearly all of these white people hate him so much that he's been elected First Minister. Anyway, he got the most complaints. Is he going to jail? Has he been?
No. So before the first day had finished, and before I think all the complaints were finally counted, so we still didn't have a winner at that point. It could have been Rowling, it could have been the First Minister. The results weren't in. But before that day was over, Police Scotland stated that neither Rowling nor the First Minister were going to be prosecuted. Police had investigated and no crime had been committed. So if Rowling at least states biological reality, she will not be subject to a hate crime. And quite a few people commented, well, of course not.
Yeah.
I mean, she has more lawyers than the island of Sark has a population. No real prosecutor, never mind the idiot in London, no real prosecutor is going to take on Rowling and be publicly humiliated like that.
This would be prosecuted in Scotland, though, right? In Edinburgh,
Correct.
Not in London. Okay.
Yeah, so it is Scots law, so it could only be prosecuted in Scotland. But in order to be prosecutable, it has to be seen by a person in Scotland. So, John, you and I could be prosecuted in Scotland for against this legislation if it was read by a Scots person. In that way, it's a little bit strange. America likes to make global laws, but the UK doesn't really like to do it. But this would be a global law. It
Wow.
requires somebody in Scotland to see the act for it to be a criminal offence in Scotland. So Rowling, because she recognises that she has this huge legal advantage, has now said, if anyone gets prosecuted in Scotland for stating biological reality, and I count myself as being gender critical, but there are some horrible things that gender critical people can do. So she's only said if they get prosecuted for stating biological reality, she will repeat that word for word, and they can prosecute them both at the same time.
So she's thrown an umbrella of coverage over the gender critical community that is responsible.
Yeah, and I think in terms of all that Rowling has done in terms of assisting the acknowledgement of biological reality, actually, and she's done a huge number of things. Biera's place, the refuge that she's got
Absolutely.
in Edinburgh, she's done a huge amount. This is the single most important thing that she has done. She has provided cover to everyone anywhere in the world to be able to argue their case that sex is important and is binary and is immutable and should be the basis of legislation rather than gender. We can say that because Rowling has essentially underwritten us. She's guaranteed that that won't be prosecuted.
Very well said, Nick. I'll only say that I went after her just a few minutes ago about her ill use of her power in terms of this Wizarding News character, and I think I'm justified in that. As was true of the Steve Vander Ark case and the Amanda Donaldson case, and now with Wizarding News. That she's a human being. She makes mistakes. But wow, when it comes to points of principle, when it comes to points of sacrifice and courage and putting your money and your reputation, really your life. And remember, she's the head of this family. They may not be visible in the news and this and that, but her children and her husband are living in the wake of these events. I mean, she's putting herself out there in these things. I mean, I'm sure, just her security costs must be through the roof right now, even for someone like that. Probably doesn't touch on her margin, but it's still, a significant investment and of her headspace. It has to be a concern all the time. And she's done this in true Gryffindor fashion, really in selfless love. One of her most fascinating tweets was her saying, people have told me if they had my money and my power, they wouldn't be interested in doing any of these things and taking up this. And she said, I can certainly understand why you would think that, but I'm alarmed a little bit at you're choosing to say it out loud as if that would be a point of honor. And that basically she's saying, with great power comes great responsibility. On the one hand, she's shown that she's human, and when she's touched a little bit to the quick and she's in a rush of enthusiasm and bravado or whatever, she's had a great event happen in her life that's confirmed her, that she'll lose it, and she'll lose her bearings, and she'll act disproportionately to the threat. But on the other hand, in this case, as you said, she's done a service to all law-abiding thinking people in the West, where the idea that you would be prosecuted for thought crimes was becoming a greater and greater reality. I mean, we live in an Orwellian existence, and I think we did in 1948 when he published 1984, but it's becoming increasingly obvious that we live in a world where free speech is not a protected right, is not a guarantee anymore. And here is Rowling putting her money and her reputation and really the lives of herself and her family in the way, standing between us and those forces. And my hat's off. As I said in my post about this, I didn't think she would be prosecuted. I was worried, like you too. I think that something would happen to her, that she would be called in, and so there would always be that threat that you were going to be diminished somehow by this. I knew that. I really wondered who in their right mind would want to put Rowling in the dock, a persecuted woman on these issues. Could there be any greater spokesman for biological reality and the social facts on the ground about gender enthusiasts, as you call them, than Rowling? No, they're not going to do that. And now she's extended that umbrella to others. I'm going to put that aside for right now and say, I've criticized her, we've praised her here. What I want to talk about is the Twitter response, because those of us who remember the avalanche in 2019 and 2020, when Rowling's Twitter threads were painful to read, in that you had people that were just, all Twitter threads are like this. Basically, just like he said, only worse, and you're worse than that, person, and you're like Hitler. All of them were about Rowling was literally murdering people by saying, no, a transgender woman is not a woman. Let's not go there. That avalanche of opinion, uniform as it was, especially among the leaders in Harry Potter fandom, was just astonishing to see how they could. She went from being overnight. She went from being an icon of progressive politics and everything good, everything, all the the never Trumpers and stuff like that. They all love J.K. Rowling, and then this happened, and she was terrible. Now 4 years later, you go on, you follow her tweets on these subjects, and the threads were almost uniformly not only positive, but adulatory. Really just adoring. And the few people that wanted to throw in their gender enthusiastic remarks were slapped down for being morons and not worshiping at this altar. What do you think caused this sea change?
I'm not completely convinced there has been a sea change yet. So the Twitter community is a strange community. And I witnessed it with you, John, after that December 2019 tweet. There was an avalanche, and really you struggled to see any positive engagement whatsoever. Now I was extremely naive at that point, and if anything, I was on the side of the negative commentators in the point of, Joe, why are you upsetting all of these people? You're a beloved author. Why are you upsetting everyone? Not understanding what the issues were. And it took a little time, and it was helped along by some of the nastier comments from the gender enthusiasts to actually investigate what on earth was going on. Since that time, gender critical Twitter has formed communities. So there are groups of people, and now I am within a community of people that are not completely, but largely gender critical. John, it may surprise you that I enjoy engaging with people I disagree with. I think it's a valuable thing to do.
Isn't that the basis of our friendship?
It is. But even so, actually, I can probably count on the fingers of one hand the enthusiastic gender enthusiasts among my mutuals. Fingers of one hand, and I've got maybe 400 mutuals now, because we tend to form communities, and it can be really difficult when you're looking at replies, because the people that think the same way you do tend to be given more prominence within the algorithm within the replies. So now when I look at anything that Rowling tweets, even the most trivial thing, I will see lots of people with similar views to me in there. A few months ago, I started a new Twitter account, and it's entirely dormant, so don't bother following it. It's called Rowling Studies. Partly was because I didn't want anyone else to get the name, and partly because it's a brand new Twitter account with no history, I could start looking at accounts that had maybe blocked me because of my views, that had different ideas, and exploring some of the responses to Rowling's tweets, looking at the responses to India Willoughby and Wizarding News. Twitter is very, very polarized. And there are plenty still of negative comments under Rowling's. I think certainly less than half now, but nothing like the landslide that it was way back in December 2019. So I think it's fair to say, yeah, maybe the tide is turning, but it has not turned yet, because all these clumps of people, the fans of India Willoughby, don't interact with the fans of J.K. Rowling. And you look at India Willoughby's responses and tweets, and you think she's the most popular person on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think things are turning. I think things are turning slower than a lot of gender critical people would like them to turn. I think in terms of a more rational approach to the medicalisation of children suffering from gender dysphoria, great strides have been made in the UK and Northern Europe. I think that's starting to get more notice now internationally. And I'm seeing more and more significant public figures and politicians taking a more rational rather than a knee-jerk approach to some of the social issues that gender identity politics create.
I agree with all those points, Nick. And I'm sure that our listeners wish I was more of your sober mind than I am. But I was in the back channels here at Hogwarts Professor. I was communicating with a dear friend who was concerned, rightly, I think, when these tweets this April 1st we came out, that this would somehow affect the Warner Brothers television series. This person believed or felt that there must be some provision in the contract that if she's arrested for hate crimes, that Warner Brothers won't be committed to that. I thought that was a hollow concern that Warner Brothers Rowling. One of the great victories that Rowling has won recently, in addition to this government finding, this report that was made, was that she and her team successfully negotiated a really lucrative and brilliant deal where she retains almost all the rights of control over the adaptation of the Harry Potter novels for television. Warner Brothers needs that contract even more than Rowling does. And so I didn't think there was any possibility that this would affect that. And fortunately, she wasn't. It was no reason to worry about that. But this person also, I just shared that I couldn't understand the change in Rowling's website. That the response was, I thought, very was compelling, in which it was explained to me that Rowling's audience has changed since 2019. That Rowling's fans are no longer even predominantly Potter fans. That Rowling's feed now, especially, I'm talking about people that will tweet in response, that are really engaged with her and her tweets. And on a list, this person shared with me, number one is people who agree with her and her feminist opinions. 2 would be Strike fans, and then only 3 would be Potter fans. Okay, and that first group is the one that responds. So when we see that great change, it's because the leaders of her Twitter threads are feminists, gender critical feminists, and that's changed. The other thing that was brought up was the change in Twitter. That Twitter in 2019 was a progressive's plaything. It was, a strictly monitored site that policed opinions to include those that were gender critical. Elon Musk, another person that put himself, in the way of the progression, has made it so that you can actually express gender critical views on that thing without fear of being canceled. So that has changed. As my friend wrote to me, I'm not sure if she won or lost, but definitely her vision is more accepted now. Maybe she convinced a lot of people, or they're not afraid of mentioning publicly, but she put this argument on the table, and a lot of people started questioning something that had been a given logically before that. And I mean, as you explained, it was your own journey, Nick. I think that Rowling forced this conversation was a large part of its eventually, all the chemical castration and surgical mutilation of minors. Horrible, horrible thing. Whether you want to call it the emasculation of women's sports, you want to call it the demasculation of women's sports, or the masculization of women's sports. All of these things had a larger profile because the most famous woman writer in the world, maybe just forget it, the most famous woman in the world, had taken a stand on this issue that was uncompromising, was sober, was even charitable. Now she's, I would say she's much less charitable now than she was in 2019 and 2020. She's much more direct about these things because what was being done to women and children, and is being done to them in terms of their safe spaces, has become even more clear to her than it was to her at that time. So, there has been change. There has been change, and I think so much as that's change for a sober assessment of the facts on the ground, and really for a sober dialogue between the gender critical and the gender extremist communities. As much as the gender extremist community partakes in dialogue rather than bomb throwing, that can be credited to J.K. Rowling, someone who takes her power and her position in the community seriously. So much so that she puts herself and her family at risk. And we wait. To circle this back around to where we started, we have a title now. We have this the Hallmarked Man. We hope it's the beginning of the Albedo or whatever. We hope it's going to have something to do with Sark. And we hope that we'll get answers about whether Charlotte committed suicide or not, whether there's going to be an investigation of that. We hope that there's going to be something about Robin as Artemis. Those things, I think, are still the two big questions that we have from the end of Running Grave going forward into Strike 8. No, we won't be participating. At least I won't be. Maybe, Nick, you go ahead, Nick. I'm not going to be participating with any kind of enthusiasm with priming the pump for Rowling's publishers for the new book. Certainly we'll be doing the fourth generation work, looking in the lake. I live in the shed, so we'll be talking shed questions as well. But that's what our focus will be in terms of speculation. We'll be talking about the mythology, talking about the alchemy, talking about the structure. That's what we think is actually, this is the opening of the fourth generation. The fourth generation will be the last generation. I'm proud that we're leading that charge, and I'm also entertained to see what the rest of the world thought when I was doing all that speculating. They thought I was a bit of a nutter. I get it now. It was kind of silly. Is that a close? Well, how do we close this thing neatly, Nick?
I think so. Well, thank you, John. I know it's been a few weeks since we released our last podcast, but I've really enjoyed chatting to you. I don't think we haven't got a schedule coming up, but I think I can promise our listeners it won't be too much time before the next podcast is released.
As soon as I can get the post that I've been working on for several months about Rowling's probable choice for her feminism, which really should be, I'm astonished that there hasn't been more discussion of this in the mainstream press, given Rowling's visibility right now as really the figurehead for feminism in the world. As soon as I'm finished with that, I hope we can talk about it here. So you can correct me on all the things that I've missed.
Thank you, John. Please look out for that. I'm really excited for it. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review, particularly if you're listening on Apple iTunes, and we will be speaking to you again soon.